Hey everyone. So today we're going to be talking about one of Trump's money stooges, the current director of the National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett. This guy is a real piece of work. Brief background is that he's been an economic advisor to Republicans going back to Bush Jr. and John McCain in the early 2000s, and he also worked in the first Trump administration doing what he does now, going on news channels and selling the steaming piles that Trump cooks up. Oh, and he's also known among economists for publishing questionable reports as well as a book that's been widely discredited because it essentially sounds like a pitch from Wall Street that oversells how great the stock market was and still is. I'll link to his Wikipedia page. You can find more info on that book and some of his other stuff there. Needless to say, the only reason he has a job this time around is because he has his lips firmly planted on Trump's rear and is willing to demean himself and his profession to make the Don sound like the greatest thing that's ever happened to the American economy. Quick side note, as I was writing this script, I noticed something interesting about his Wikipedia page. The entire section on that failed book titled Dow 36,000 has been deleted. And you can see here that the last edit was made on August 11th, the day after I took my notes on this page. So now it seems like someone is running cover for the guy who runs cover for Trump. Huh. Anyway, back to the main point. Today we are going to be specifically challenging his defense of Trump firing the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics last week, Dr. Erica McIntarfer. Let's watch Kristen Welker on Meet the Press run him over with facts and solid questioning, and then we'll get into what he's lying about and why I hate his smug face.
And joining me now is the director of the White House National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett. Mr. Hassett, welcome to Meet the Press.
Great to be here. Thank you.
It's great to have you here. Let's start with President Trump's decision to fire the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Erica McIntarfer, who he accused of manipulating job numbers. Mr. Hassett, what evidence does the administration have that she manipulated the jobs numbers?
Right. The bottom line is that we had a jobs report. The last jobs report that we had, we'll get the next one on Friday, was way above expectation because American employers are creating jobs in America again.
The snippet from the CNN interview I just showed is only from a couple of months ago, so it's pretty interesting. He's praising the jobs numbers from the same exact people at the BLS. As with many MAGA cult members, the numbers are flawless when they work in their favor, but rigged and fake when they don't.
What we've seen over the last few years is massive revisions to the jobs numbers. In fact, they were extremely reliable, the kind of numbers that you want to guide policy decisions and markets through COVID. And then when COVID happened, because response rates went down a lot, then revision rates skyrocketed so that the typical monthly revision often was bigger than the number itself. And now we had a number that just came out. The actual number for the month wasn't so bad, but the 2 months before were revised down by more than had ever happened since 1968.
What he's saying about the revisions isn't wrong on the surface or by the facts. Yes, the revisions were larger than the final numbers, meaning the projections were wrong. But when he talks about the data being inaccurate, as if that's the fault of one person at the BLS, the argument has zero legs to stand on. So here's the first example of this dude blatantly lying, and also where we get into my personal critique. I can't stand his smug, smiley laughing face when he's clearly lying. I hope Hassett doesn't play poker because he is the most obvious and frankly insulting tell. As we'll see in a minute, this was not the largest jobs number revision ever. I'm going to show you a few websites and articles in this hit piece that illustrate just how much of a liar this supposed economic wizard is. Now, a simple Google search for jobs numbers revisions points you to some trustworthy analysis from the Economic Policy Innovation Center and a piece dealing with the revisions for a full year ending August 21st, 2024. This isn't written about the current situation, obviously, but it gives us an idea of how and why the numbers have fluctuated so much in recent years. Next screenshots are from a CNN.com article, which I will also link in the description, that directly refutes the statement Trump blurted out on his 2-bit social media platform and which Hassett is trying to run cover for. The article gives some background on what the BLS is, what it does, and how it collects data. It's pretty thorough. It also refutes the lie of the latest revisions being the largest in American history. That's not at all true, and these fools are off by a lot. The worst since data began being tracked in 1979 was, surprise, surprise, during the pandemic, when the revision showed the projected numbers were off by 679,000 in March of 2020.
And in 2015, Alan Greenspan and I were asked to attend a conference at BLS where we were asked to give advice about how to modernize the data. And we warned that if they didn't try to let the data collection and calculation keep up with the data that was happening in the economy, that we would have problems like this.
What? What the hell does that statement even mean? Sounds like a word salad he learned how to make from Chef Donald. Next, we have some more from the CNN article that shares how the data is collected and points out where issues and inconsistencies likely come from. It's an issue of people and businesses inaccurately reporting their numbers or inaccurately answering survey questions. One final takeaway I found in the article sheds some light on why exactly Trump has his panties in a bunch over the BLS numbers. Because BLS jobs data is used to decide if the economy is in a recession or not. And we all know that could never be allowed to happen on a Republican administration's watch. You'll notice in his next response that he tries to use a somewhat similar situation in the UK as an example of how the numbers were rigged, as Trump is claiming. But the problem with this argument is that no one in the UK tried blaming the issue on the head of the agency that collects the data.
And finally, in the UK, they had a very similar problem. And in 2023, they had to, for a while, shut down the data agency in the UK for the same kinds of problems.
An article from Bloomberg tells us that the UK Labour Party found that their jobs data collection methods were flawed, and they immediately set to work repairing that whole system rather than scapegoating one person. So it's really comparing apples to potatoes? Because the UK Prime Minister and other party members didn't deny the numbers' accuracy out of blatant egomania, and Hassett doesn't even bring up the possibility that it could be the data collection methods at BLS that caused the issue he's mad about. I'm going to let the interview play out for a bit because Kristen Welker does a great job of pressing him on the question of direct, hard evidence of the numbers being rigged. And in this next bit, she quotes the previous BLS head who rips to shreds the idea that one person could possibly rig these numbers.
But just to be very clear, does the administration have any evidence that it was rigged, as the president said? And will you be presenting that to the American public?
Well, the evidence is that there have been a bunch of revisions that could appear to partisans. Oh, I mean, the revisions are hard evidence. There, for example, there was a 818,000 revision making the Joe Biden job record a lot worse that came out after he withdrew from the presidential campaign. There have been a bunch of patterns that could make people wonder, and I think the most important thing for people to know is that it's the president's highest priority that the data be trusted and that people get to the bottom of why these revisions are so unreliable.
Well, let me ask you about what William Beach, he was the last commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. He was appointed by President Trump. He was sharply critical of this decision to get rid of his successor. I want to read you what he wrote. He says, quote, "These numbers are constructed by hundreds of people. They're finalized by about 40 people. These 40 people are very professional people who've served under Republicans and Democrats, and the commissioner does not see these numbers until the Wednesday prior to the release on Friday. By that time, the numbers are completely set into the IT system. They've been programmed. They are simply reported to the commissioner so the commissioner can on Thursday brief the president's economic team. The commissioner doesn't have any hand or any influence or any way of even knowing the data until they're completely done."
Okay, now prepare for lots of screenshots. What I have here is information pulled directly from BLS, which shows several things. First of all, this table B is showing one version of the numbers in question, which are technically called the employment situation summary. Now, I'll be honest, this table is pretty confusing, and it took me all day to notice the line that tells us what these numbers actually represent. It's the change over the month in thousands. But we can get a really detailed picture with 10 years worth of data by searching the BLS site for archived ESS data, which I did. You're welcome, econ nerds. As you can see, depending on the specific sector of the job market, the fluctuations are not only wildly different, but they vary more widely from one period to the next. For instance, we can see a crazy drop-off in goods producing from July of last year to May of 2025. July 2024 added 12,000 jobs, whereas May 2025 shows a net loss of 13,000 jobs. I'll be honest, I have no clue what these numbers mean in terms of monetary value or contributions to the GDP. But as with the other table, you can look at specific sectors that are not doing so hot and make logical sense of the reasons, even from a layman's perspective. Like coal mining, which has been on a crazy decline for the last 50 years because we just don't use coal the way we used to. And the data over the last 10 years shows that there is not any real growth happening. So it's pretty interesting that despite all of Trump's blustering about clean coal and how much he wants to put those people back in the mines, some of the largest drops in the last 10 years on the table for mining jobs happened during his first term, and there hasn't been any movement on that this time around. Speaking of, let's hear some more from that clown.
Isn't this the very definition of shooting the messenger?
No, absolutely not. I mean, the bottom line is that there were people involved in creating these numbers. And if I were running the BLS and I had a number that was a huge politically important revision, the biggest since 1968, actually revisions should be smaller, right, because computers are better and so on, then I would have a really long report explaining exactly what happened.
Again, with the laughing while lying, you are not funny, dude. One thing that is funny, though, is that he mentions they should be putting out a really long report. And it's funny because that's exactly what the BLS does every month. This is what they put out every 30 days. See if you could fit this into your calendar month. There are over 30 headings here, each page filled with data and analysis, including a general summary right at the top. They even give a little bit of a disclaimer at the end of that summary mentioning when and how the yearly data will be released. So clearly, Hassett's just living in the same conservative bubble that everyone else in the cult is, except what's infuriating is that this guy has a degree in economics and is one of the ones that should know better. Instead, he's happy to go on national TV and do the overlord's bidding. Now let's show him shoving that foot all the way down to the small intestine, and then we're going to get into some clips from his prior appearances on other shows.
And we didn't get that. We didn't get that. And so right now, people, Goldman Sachs, people on Wall Street are wondering, where did these revisions come from and why do they keep happening? And what we need is a fresh set of eyes over at the BLS. And there are great career staffers. One of the top BLS staffers is actually working in the White House to help us understand the jobs numbers. Back when I worked with Alan Greenspan for something like 40 years, and I've never seen revisions like this.
But just to be very clear, I mean, there are 40 people put these numbers together. Is the president planning to fire all 40 people involved in putting these numbers together?
We're going to try to get the numbers so that they're transparent and reliable.
So if you're thinking, where have I seen this Beavis with glasses before? It could be from literally any of the cable news channels, from Fox to CNN to CNBC. Here are some of his greatest misses. And this little montage will not only give us several examples of his annoying tell, but in a few bits, he completely contradicts and undercuts the current point he's trying to make about BLS numbers. Most of his recent appearances have been trying to sell and or explain the tariff nonsense, but even in those interviews, he manages to recycle other talking points and smiley face lie about tons of stuff.
Right now to talk more about this is White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. And Kevin, thank you for being with us this morning. Got a lot of questions and hoping you can give us a little insight into what's happening. First of all, are there talks taking place behind the scenes that could potentially stop these tariffs before they go in, or is it your understanding that these will take effect at midnight tonight?
There have been a heck of a lot of talks over the weekend. I've been in the White House for most of the weekend, and the thing I can say is that I think it's totally 100% being miscovered, this story. What you need to do is go back and read the executive order where President Trump was absolutely 100% clear that this is not a trade war, this is a drug war. We're saying we're really, really serious about going after fentanyl, and President Trump means it. And so there's all this fentanyl shipping across the borders. There, in the past, have been caravans of people parading across our border, carrying drugs and other things. And the response of our neighbors has not been, hey, we're going to help you stop this problem. It's go ahead and build a wall.
We will have the wall, and Mexico will pay for the wall. Mexico will pay for the wall, believe me. Believe me.
So imagine, Becky, if I had like all this stuff going on in my house next to yours, and all this stuff was leaking into your property, and then you say, Kevin, you got to stop all that crime in your place, and I'm like, hey, you know what, Becky, build a wall. That's disrespectful. And this is the attitude the president has towards what's going on right now. He wants them to be respectful of the United States and help solve the problem rather than feed it.
So this
and
is
we've
really
made a lot of progress with the Mexicans.
This is really just the opening. Okay, so Mexico is really where the biggest problem for fentanyl is. We had one of our reporters earlier this morning, I haven't seen these figures myself, say that something like only 40 pounds of fentanyl was found at the Canadian border versus a much huger position down in the south part of this border. This is a way to get people to the table to say we are going to attack this and work with you, and that would call off all of these tariffs that are going to be put in place?
President Trump will decide what he's going to call off and what he's not, but he wants everybody at the table.
And certainly there's not a clear set of standards that say if you do X, Y, and Z, this won't happen.
You know, we've got a hard deadline that's coming up that's going to, I think, be great news for markets once they see the clarity about how reasonable it is to have reciprocal tariffs. There are a heck of a lot of countries that play by the rules, where we have big trade surpluses with the country because they're playing by the rules and don't tariff our products. And then there are a few, just a few really, where the trade deficits are huge, they're persistent, they last for years. They're doing things like sending autos into the U.S. but not letting our autos go to their countries, and doing it in a way that harms American workers. Right. So what you're seeing right now is when people are naysayers and getting all upset about, oh, market this, market that, tax hikes, they're thinking that the $1 trillion is just going to go away. But President Trump's plan is to use the tariff revenue to balance the budget and to reduce taxes.
That's from us. If let's say China goes down half, or some people, let's say they respond. But the other half is going to be people here raising prices for Americans, right? So that's okay?
If I charge a tax to Joe, then Joe pays the tax mostly. If I charge a tax to a Chinese exporter, then maybe there's a price effect on Joe, but you know the Chinese exporter is going to pay some tax too. So on net, logically, you got to be better off if you're running the tax through inelastically supplying foreign national.
You know, Kevin, as for bringing a lot of the manufacturing back here, that's just, you know, Americans are we like instant gratification.
If I can't poop in the street, why should my tax dollars pay for someone else to?
I don't think you'd see the effects of this in terms of, you know, suddenly Michigan or Ohio or any of those great states that lost so many industries. That won't be back for years, even if you do try to do these things.
I thought that too, Joe, but then I was fiddling with the data as we're getting ready to meet with the president.
Okay, I gotta stop you right there. So first of all, what the hell is this fiddling with the numbers? Are you playing with Lincoln Logs or running economic job data? Also, this is another example of him lauding the jobs numbers when it suits his argument, and this was only a few months ago.
President and Vice President last week. And one of the things I noticed was that the capacity utilization rate for autos in the U.S. was around 80% pre-COVID under President Trump, and it's around 60% now. And so one reason why we had 9,000 auto jobs created in the last jobs report is that we've got all this excess capacity in auto manufacturing in the U.S. And so as we go towards reciprocal trade, I really expect that there are going to be tens of thousands of auto jobs created this year. And you already saw it in the last month because capacity utilization is so low. So Joe Biden let, like many other things, the auto industry get out of control, and President Trump is out there fixing it.
Okay, ignore the technical mumbo-jumbo about automaker capacity or whatever. This clown is trying to claim Biden ruined the auto industry. So it wasn't the fact that every manufacturer except Ford has been gobbled up by some multinational conglomerate, all of which are constantly cutting programs, vehicles, and jobs to increase shareholder profit. Right. Gotcha. Oh, but I'm sorry. You were saying?
I think there should be clarity, absolute clarity. The president is clear that we're going to have reciprocal.
Getting it now?
Well, yeah, I mean, April 2nd, you're going to see the reciprocal tariffs. Between now and then, we've been in a negotiation with flexibility with Mexico and Canada, and we've got the border under control, and we're making a huge amount of progress on fentanyl. Those have both been very positive developments that were related to the tariff policy. But yeah, absolutely. Between now and April 2nd, there'll be some uncertainty, but...
So there should be clarity, and the president is bringing clarity by his statements, but there will also be some uncertainty until the tariffs hit. Okay. Next, he's on with Maria Bartolo Colon, and these simps are fawning all over Trump's statements about using the tariffs to stabilize the supply chain. The problem is, both of these idiots are acting like the supply chain based in China is only being run by the Chinese government and Chinese companies, when the real problem is that it is American corporations that have done all of the offshoring and supply chain divestment that they lament. But God forbid a Republican and the Republican state media channel should ever speak ill of the most perfect American citizens, our big, beautiful corporations. These assholes are always mad at the wrong people.
I like what the president just said. If we didn't have tariffs, there would be no incentive to get their supply chains into America. That is so critical. Is that the real priority here, to ensure that America has a supply chain and we are not so reliant on communist China, a clear adversary?
Absolutely, Maria. You said it very, very well. But the other thing is that I think it's more interesting to me is that he has convinced the American people correctly that they're better off if they buy American. And that puts a lot of pressure on everybody to come to the table one last time and give us everything they got. And I can tell you, I can report that everybody is exactly doing that.
Here, he's trying to say that the Great Orange Charlatan has convinced everyone that we're better off buying American. Dude, no one has to convince us of that. The problem is that American-made stuff is way more expensive for reasons Kevin Hassett should understand, and that's why people who are broke, because Trump gives tax cuts and promotions to his friends, are more or less forced to buy things made in China. Then more smiley, laughy lying, talking about how he can report that everyone is coming to the table to negotiate. Yet here we are in the future, and the administration has yet to deliver anything close to the 90 deals in 90 days.
And if you go back and look, you can see the negotiation signals were out there already, even on that Monday where somebody made a fake tweet that suddenly said that I was saying something that ended up being kind of mostly true on Wednesday. And so anyway, I think...
Now back to CNBC. Only this joker could laugh at the fact that someone tweeted pretending to be him and the tweet managed to move the markets. In case you forgot, this was the whole debacle where it looked like Trump purposely crashed the markets for a day so he and some friends could make buttloads of money buying low and selling when prices went up again. Of course, this was never proven, but statements like the one Hassett just made don't work to disprove suspicions.
These trading partners are going to be emboldened now to not do anything because they know that the president's not serious or he's going to blink. So they can just wait out, and they got 90 days now, and they don't have to do anything.
I talked with Jameson Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, yesterday, just to get an update on the number of countries. And of course, saying you've got a lot of countries calling, that's one thing, right? But, they could be calling to say, how's the weather out there? There's a little bit of discussion about exactly, well, did they really make an offer? But for sure, there's a bunch of offers that are really sensible offers, and they're coming from our top trading partners. And it's some of the most progress in trade negotiation that I think probably the most progress that we've ever seen. Have some negotiations. The fact that people started to send stuff. We had 2 deals almost closed as of last week. Almost closed. Getting them closed requires the lawyers to work forever, and so on. And so getting them closed by yesterday was not quite going to happen. But yes, there's a big inventory of deals that are right close to the finish line.
Hassett goes on to try and joke about all the countries calling the White House, and he smiley-face BS's regarding the deals that are in the works, and tries to sell everyone on how great it is that they almost got 20 deals done, then they almost got 2 deals done, but it was those damn lawyers that got in the way. None of it makes any sense or follows any of the timelines that he himself has laid out multiple times.
When I talked about, 60 days, 90 days, the book Around the World in 80 Days kind of ran into my mind. And I'm thinking, well, if we say 90 days, then let's shoot for 80 days. And I think that when I look at the schedules that we're getting ready to debate and talk about, I think it's very doable. Very doable.
Wrong.
Then we have an appearance on CNN where Casey Hunt tries to get some straight answers from him, but as usual, he talks his way around pre-approved talking points, all the while smiley face lying. He answers her first question about a specific deal with more general commentary on how great the process is and how well it's going, and then he makes some asinine statement about how the deals are really putting the American worker first. Sorry to say, but I'm pretty sure foreign nations don't give two craps about American workers. They are looking out for their workers, which points to a huge problem with all of this America First nonsense. If we are told that the American government under Trump is really looking out for American workers' best interests, why wouldn't we think that other countries are putting their own workers first too? It's either a denial of reality or a disgusting level of isolationist arrogance that thinks everyone in the world is going to bow to the wishes of America at their own expense.
I do want to start with some of this news from the president where and we also heard Howard Lutnick, the cabinet official, say that there was an unnamed deal that was close. The president is talking about India. Can you just tell us in a clear way, what deal are we close to and where do things stand with India? Is that the deal in question?
Yeah, I mean, there are multiple deals that are extraordinarily close, especially with our Asian trading partners. Secretary Lutnick and Bessent and I were in the Oval yesterday discussing it with the president, and we've seen sketches of deals. I'm not going to put, deals that aren't signed in front of the American people until the president's ready to do that, and the foreign governments are ready to do it. But the thing that I can say that I've been astonished at is how much access to foreign markets U.S. producers are going to have because of these deals. The president was really impressed with the status of the negotiations, but especially impressed by the fact that finally they're putting the American worker first.
He also uses the situation that occurred with Amazon, considering adding a tariff notation on orders, to yet again make a false assertion about who pays tariffs and when. And of course, he's smiling and laughing all through this. Then he just completely debases himself, making the disgusting statement that he likes the way Trump looks. I'm sure absolutely no one agrees with you, Kev. Last bit is a deflection of the analysis that, say, Americans might feel short-term pain from the tariffs, again claiming the jobs data is good. Okay.
The bottom line is that if we charge a tariff on a foreign country, then if they have inelastic supply to us, then the supplier in that country is going to bear the tariff, not the U.S. consumer. And the idea that Amazon is going to say that the tariff is passing through to the consumer means that they don't understand economics. And so you covered it as a debacle. I did think it was a debacle for whoever's doing economics at Amazon, because they were assuming something that's contrary to basic economics about who bears the tariff. And it was correct for Jeff Bezos to apologize for it and to correct the record that Amazon, whoever did it, made a big mistake. I wonder if they'll have a job tomorrow. And I don't think that Americans want to give President Trump a chance because they like the way he looks on TV, although I think he's great on TV. And President Trump's going in and he's going to fix the problem, and he's fixing it already. I don't think you need to talk about short-term pain. The last jobs report was fantastic.
Now, on to Trump's newest whipping post, CBS. Margaret Brennan begins by asking about Medicare cuts in the big stupid bill, and he deflects by quoting another talking point. This is the one about waste, fraud, and abuse. Problem is, when he says Medicare is totally not on the table, he's smiling and laughing and stuttering. So, obviously a lie.
So I do want to allow you to respond to some of the very specific criticisms that Senator Klobuchar made. One of the things she brought up was something that, frankly, the Senate Majority Leader seemed to acknowledge was under discussion, and that was touching Medicare, making some kind of adjustment. He said anything we can do that's waste, fraud, and abuse is open to discussion. Is the White House open to any discussion around Medicare?
Well, first of all, what's happening is that the senators, respecting the legislative process, are discussing what they think that they can put on the table. And the president has made it clear that ending waste, fraud, and abuse, and giving benefits to illegals, and giving benefits to people who are able-bodied workers, those are his high priorities. If the Senate comes up with other things they'd like us to look at, I guess we would have a look at them. But there have been a lot of false stories about Medicare being on the table, and it's totally not on the table.
Next, she asks him if he can provide any certainty on the tariff situation, and his response is, "You can be certain there will be some tariffs." Is that supposed to be a joke? Or are you just so full of crap that you think this answer is acceptable to the businesses your party claims to care so much about?
So our CBS News polling shows that most Americans don't like the tariffs, and most Americans don't think the Trump administration has a plan. We're also hearing from top economists, including the head of the Philadelphia Federal Reserve, who said the rules are really unclear and business leaders need certainty. When will they get that certainty from the administration?
Right. Well, you can be certain that there's going to be some tariffs.
Then the same old tired lie that China will pay the tariffs, and he's laughing and smiling while talking about how dictators want to control their country. Oh, you mean like how your boss wants to jail protesters and fire career civil servants who don't follow marching orders or give him numbers he doesn't like?
So what's going on, right, is that we've had a trade deficit with China forever and ever because they just want to sell stuff here so that they can create jobs in China and help, control their government. So if people are unemployed, then it's harder for a dictatorship to run. And so the point is just that if we put a tariff on them, then they're going to bear the tariff.
Next, we have a trip down memory lane with Hassett and the first Trump admin going on CNBC to sell them on the tax plan that they ended up passing, which cut corporate taxes. The whole interview is him justifying these tax cuts and using a lot of fancy words and very specific economic concepts to fight common sense, smiling the whole damn time.
Walk us through how you get to this number. And I mean, you're talking 5% wage growth. We haven't seen that for an awfully long time.
Well, I mean, exactly how you get the 4,000, there are 3 or 4 different models that we go into in the report. But the background problem is really just this, that we find a clear structural break in the relationship between corporate profits in the U.S. and wages. If you go back and look at the past, it used to be if you get 1% corporate profit growth, then wage growth would go up by 1% as well. But now that's almost disconnected completely. Over the last 8 years, corporate profit growth has been 11%, but real wage growth has been almost nothing at all, a little more than 0.5% a year. And so we've been studying why that disconnect has happened, and the basic point is that the profits are now in Ireland. Since we're the highest corporate tax place on earth, U.S. corporations are locating their activity and their profits offshore. That's increasing the demand for workers over there, reducing the demand for workers over here, and keeping wage growth from going up along with the welfare of the corporations. And so
he wants us to believe that corporations will pass savings and taxes on to employees by raising wages. Well, guess what? They didn't.
They're not so much here. They're leaving most of them over there, and they're using the money to pay workers over there, not workers over here. And so the question is, what happens if we go down to 20%? If we go down to 20%, then they're going to bring that activity back here, increase the demand for workers here, and drive up wages as well.
Well, wouldn't they also drive up buybacks and dividends? And yes, maybe we'll see some capital investment in machinery and new plants and maybe a little bit in wages too. But it's really hard to find an economist, including the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center, which I know you don't agree with, that actually thinks $4,000 for working household income boost as a result of this corporate tax cut is realistic.
Kevin, looking at this from the position of your average middle-class American, we've seen the charts that show that the share of total U.S. income of the bottom 90% has shrunk while the top 10% has really grown. There's the point you made about corporate profits being disconnected from the working man. You see all this, and somehow it seems weird that the solution is going to be cutting corporate taxes. How do you make that argument to the middle class?
Well, I think that what's going on right now is that we've made a tax code or constructed a tax code that has told businesses to create the jobs overseas. If you create the job overseas, then we're not going to tax you very much at all. But if you create the job here, we're going to tax the heck out of you. And I think every American understands that if we're chasing employers offshore, then that can't be good for America's workers.
He ends this one doing a very Republican thing, blaming the issue of corporations finding loopholes in the tax code on the tax code. Again, these wonderful companies are not doing anything wrong themselves. They are just taking advantage of every little thing they can do to increase shareholder profit and not pay American workers.
And then there's Larry Summers, the former Treasury Secretary of the U.S., Kevin, who I know you guys have gone back and forth with a little on the economics, and he's on the other side. But I did ask him about this stat, the 4,000, because President Trump mentioned it in a speech to truckers as a result of the corporate tax rate. He says it's an absurdity.
Well, it's hard to respond to something where he says it's an absurdity, but he doesn't say why. And I can tell you that he doesn't say why because he doesn't know why, because it's not an absurdity. And it's not an absurdity because there's this big literature that we cite that shows that you get an effect like that.
Final old clip is another visit with CNBC, and right off the bat, they are lauding the great jobs numbers from Trump Part 1. Again, same group, same data collection methods he supposedly warned them about 3 years prior. The second interesting thing from this interview is when he spins some BS and tries to talk crap on the Democrats, which is interesting because in a part of one of these interviews that I lost, he says, "I'm not a politician," but he sure loves to talk like one.
Let's talk about the economy first up, because we got some very strong numbers on the jobs front last Friday.
Sure,
when
we
we
did,
saw that the unemployment rate fell to almost the lowest level in 50 years.
I was 7 years old the last time it was that low. You know, the IMF put out a forecast that was a couple of tenths lower for global GDP. And I think that at CEA, our models concur with that. And so the rest of the world is looking a little bit weaker. Now that, politically is interesting because one of the Democrats' main talking points is, oh, the whole world's booming, and so therefore the U.S. booming is not President Trump's policies. I think the current trajectory suggests that there's some lie to that, really.
That sounds like a bargaining chip to say to the Chinese. I mean, that doesn't sound like a bargaining chip for the Chinese, because this is something that we here in the United States should be concerned about. If you told any S&P 500 company that 11% of your revenues could be on the table, I'm sure many of the CEOs would say, you know what, we, the U.S., need to get back to the bargaining table and make this work. Do you feel that, does the administration feel that urgency?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We've had urgency about the China situation from the beginning. We can see clearly the behaviors that we'd like to have change, and, the Chinese understand what that is.
Also, it's interesting to see that even 7 years ago, he's talking about bringing China to the table to discuss trade, and he has the balls to talk about the behaviors they would like to see changed, as if we in any way can control what the CCP does. Now that's hilarious. No wonder he's laughing about it. Oh, wait, no, that's because he's lying again.
At the White House, do you see the decline in Shanghai, the decline in Hong Kong, and you think, you know what, that's better for us?
I'm not a negotiator, and I can tell you my wife doesn't even let me near the checkbook, right? So I'm not involved in the negotiations.
He then tries to joke, in air quotes, about how he's not a negotiator, and his wife won't even let him near the checkbook. First of all, I don't know how those things are related, but also, am I supposed to seriously take economic advice from someone who can't balance a checkbook? Yikes. Last bit from this one, he references that old gem of Trump's infrastructure week and how it will probably happen at some point, maybe? Nope, never did. Biden got it done, though.
Kevin, we've asked you a lot of questions about potential threats to the economy, things that could surprise to the downside. But last question, is there anything that you think could potentially surprise to the upside and lead to a better economy next year than you're anticipating?
Yeah, I think that absolutely there are a lot of things that could surprise on the upside. But one of the big things is policy. President Trump has a really aggressive agenda that he talked about all the way back to the campaign. And we're not done. We've got deregulation that we can keep doing. And we've also got an infrastructure plan, for example, that we were hoping that we could move this year, but I'm sure that President Trump and the team will think about whether next year is a better time. But
President Trump himself was happy to accept the jobs numbers issued under McIntyre's leadership when the numbers were good. Take a listen to what he said in the past.
The numbers were much better, as you know, than projected by the media.
In 3 months, we have created 350,000 jobs. Think of that.
A lot of jobs are being created. That's what happened this morning. We saw the jobs.
So is the president prepared to fire anyone who reports data that he disagrees with?
Damn! No, absolutely not. The president wants his own people there so that when we see the numbers, they're more transparent and more reliable. And if there are big changes and big revisions, we expect more big revisions for the jobs data in September, for example, then we want to know why. We want people to explain it to us.
All right, but bottom line, were the numbers wrong? Do you have any hard evidence that you can present to the American public that these numbers, these revisions that were reported, and there were plenty of revisions under former President Biden, including right before the election, do you have any hard evidence that these numbers were wrong?
Yeah, there is very hard evidence that we're looking at the biggest revision since 1968.
Are you going to present that evidence?
If you look at the number itself, it is the evidence.
But just saying it's an outlier is not evidence, Mr. Hassett.
It's a historically important outlier. It's something that's unprecedented. So unprecedented that I've been looking at it for 40 years, and I'm like, it must be a typo.
Okay.
That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
All right, that's all. Thanks for sticking around. Another long one. Peace out.